Joaquin of the Delta Conservancy. I want to welcome all the folks in the room, but certainly those that are joining us via teleconference. And this is the first time in a long time that we've actually come together in session where we've been in the room together. And again, we certainly welcome everyone who's with us, however you're joining us this morning. So with that, maybe we'll call the roll, establish a quorum, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's make sure we have a quorum first. So.
I can do a roll call.
Okay, thanks, Jessica.
Supervisor Natoli.
Here.
Vice Chair Matsumoto.
Here.
Supervisor Mitchoff.
Here.
Supervisor Miller.
Here, on the phone.
We hear you loud and clear. Thank you. Love it. Supervisor Mashburn.
Right here.
Supervisor Provenza. Not yet. Richard Gillihan.
Here.
Thanks. Brian Cash.
Here.
Margot Kohler?
Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a Lee. I'm sorry, that was wrong. Pardon me. Leo Winternitz and Board Member Sandoval. So I'll call those both board members will be absent at this time.
Okay, and we do have a quorum.
And we do have a quorum.
Okay, good. If Member Cash, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Sure.
It's fine.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Brian.
Since we have a small group now, do you want us to do introductions all the way?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay, so since we already called roll, we have some folks in the room, and we got to see all the folks with us, so why don't we do some introductions so we know who's with us as well. So I'll start to my right.
Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay Triba and I'm an associate with Kearns & West, and I'll be giving a presentation later on today. Thanks for having me.
Hi everyone, I'm Janet Lake, Freeport Citizens Community Association, and I'm here on behalf of the Gateway Monument Project.
My name is Bob Lake, I'm with the Freeport Citizens Community also.
Hi there, Eric Vink, Delta Protection Commission.
Hi, Marge Kohler with the Yolo Basin Foundation.
Hi, I'm Hope Miller. I'm a communications analyst for the Conservancy.
That's me. Deborah Kustick. I'm the Deputy Executive Officer for the Delta Conservancy.
Campbell Ingram, Executive Officer, Delta Conservancy. And then on the phone, people can sound off if they could.
Any of our guests or presenters that are on the phone, just identify yourself, please.
Kevin Busey, County of Sacramento.
Thank you.
Good morning, this is Christina Granzo from the San Francisco Estuary Institute. Good morning, this is Carrie Buckman from DWR. Good morning, everyone. This is Nicole Rinke, and I am counsel to the board.
Anyone else? If not, Jessica, you can tell us.
Jessica Adel, I'm the Fiscal and Board Analyst for the Conservancy.
Great. Okay. Again, welcome everyone, and glad we're together and to hear all your voices. So,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So so many people on phone, we don't have a Zoom of them?
We do not.
No.
Oh, okay.
Next time,
Pardon me?
next meeting, hopefully.
We're getting that
all
technology in place.
Yeah.
okay. Very good. Okay. With that, then, having gone through the introductions, we'll go to our next agenda item, which is.
Can we just do a couple quick announcements
sure.
really quick? Sorry.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, just again wanted to say great to see everyone in person after 2 years. We are going to pull agenda item 13 from the list. There have been some last minute developments, so we will not consider that item. Just a reminder for folks on the phone, please mute yourself if you're not talking. And then Jessica, I think we're going to do a little bit of more logistics.
Oh, you betcha. I'm sure you all know, but our fire exits are this room and the front door. If you haven't been here before, our restaurants are outside, restrooms are outside in the courtyard, and there's that key right under the cloth that you'll want to grab if you need to use the restroom. This meeting is being recorded. And there is a sign-up sheet in the lobby for COVID purposes. If you are not in the roll call, could you just put your name and contact information out at some time before you leave? Thank you.
Great. Now we're ready to go.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, Jessica, and thanks, Campbell. I just wanted to note, too, that a little bit after 9:30, I'm going to have to step out of the room. I'm on the Regional Sanitation Board for Sacramento County, and we actually have an item that pertains to a couple of our Delta communities, both the community of Hood and Franklin, where we're working to bring sanitary sewer to those communities. And so there's an item there to initiate some further action, and I want to make sure I weigh in on that. So Sandy Matsumoto, our Vice Chair, has graciously agreed if I step out, she'll be in good hands with her, but I won't be leaving for the morning, so I just wanted to note that. So, okay, with that, thank you all. Thanks, Campbell. And let's go to our public comment on new business. So I assume this is comment on any item that's not on the agenda. Is that correct? Okay. So anyone here or anyone on the phone wish to address the Conservancy Board on any item that's not on the agenda? And there's no way to know if you raise your hand. I guess if you're on the phone. So
just chime in if you're on the phone.
Yeah, just chime in. So, all right. Hearing no one, and again, if somebody feels they were missed, we can come back to that later. But for the purposes here, no one in the room on any item that's not on the agenda. So that'll take us right to our next item, which is our consent calendar, which is an action item, and it's our minutes from the board summary, excuse me, and from the March 23rd, 2022 meeting. Information was put out in the packet. So is there any additions, corrections, modifications to the summary notes from the meeting? All right, seeing none, then this is an action item. So if there's no public comment, anyone wish to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, then let's bring it back to the board. Motion will be in order.
Move approval.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Bashman, second by Cash to approve the March 23rd, 2022 board meeting summary and action items. All right, with that, then we'll go to Jessica for a roll call vote.
I guess so. Do we still need to do full roll call out loud because we're not hybrid?
But we are.
But we are have that. Alrighty. Supervisor Natoli.
Aye.
Vice Chair Matsumoto.
Abstain.
Abstain. Supervisor Mitchell.
Yes.
Supervisor Miller.
Yes.
Supervisor Mashburn.
Yes.
Board Member Gillihan.
Abstain.
Brian Cash.
Aye.
We have 2 absent, so we do not have a quorum on this one. We only have 5 votes.
I'll flip my vote to aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The motion carries with 6 votes.
Okay, very good. All right, with that then, let's go to our executive officer report. And Campbell, we've got several items you're going to give us update on, so
Yes.
we'll turn to you.
Thank you. Good morning again, everyone. The executive officer report is on page 7 of your packet. I'll start with a staffing update. We continue to do recruitment for an environmental scientist, an associate government program analyst, and a staff services manager 2 position. So we're actively trying to get staffed up again. We've been doing interviews last week, this week, and next to fill those positions. So we're hopeful to be staffed up shortly. You may have seen that the Deputy Executive Officer position has been announced. You might also know that Deborah is still here with us, thankfully.
Great.
She has graciously agreed to stay through July, early July. So we will do official farewells at our July board meeting for Deborah when that next board meeting. The position was reclassified to what's called a Career Executive Assignment B. And that is hopeful it will broaden the applicant pool as well as reduce some of the compaction issues. So if anyone knows of anyone who has really exceptional state administrative and program management experience, please feel free to send them our way. The position closes on June 6th. Wanted to give a little bit of an update on our COVID procedures. Basically, we now have all of our procedures and policies in place. They have not been approved by the board or by the unions yet, but our expectation is that will be happening soon. So with today, we are welcoming staff back voluntarily, and our first in-person staff meeting will be Monday the 13th of June. And we've talked a little bit about our telework policy in the past. We want to be as flexible as possible and provide as much, for all the reasons of quality of life, reduce traffic, reduce carbon footprint. Our policy is going to be that staff need to be in the office all together twice a month at minimum. We know that staff will be here much more frequently than that, and we'll be covering meetings, and there will be some staff who want to be here more frequently than that, but we believe that we've demonstrated that we can be very productive remotely, and so we want to maximize that option. Moving on, the Ecosystem Restoration Program, just a quick update. The nutria eradication standard update is on page 10. You can check that out. I'm having trouble with masks and fogging here on my glasses. I did want to do it, it's not in the executive officer report, but just a very quick budget update. The governors may revise at a total of $55 million for the Delta Conservancy. $46 million of that is new money for nature-based solutions. We're very excited to see that in the budget. The Senate bill just came out this week, and it actually has $100 million for the Delta. So we're not exactly sure where it'll ultimately land, but and we won't know anything for certain until July 1. Welcome, Supervisor Provenza.
Morning, Jim.
Hello, sorry I'm late.
Yeah, but we should know more by June 15th.
June 15th?
Yeah, the budget has to pass by June 15th. So.
Good.
You should just note for the record, because people are on the phone, that Jim's joined us.
Oh, okay. For everyone on the phone, Supervisor Provenza has just joined us, so welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, just the Delta Science Program. Just a quick highlight, the Fish-Friendly Farming Program is now moving forward quite nicely. A couple of large farming operations have indicated interest in enrolling. For Delta Science Coordination, Rachel has provided a nice write-up that just describes our coordination roles and activities with regard to the Delta Protection Implementation, Interagency Implementation Committee Restoration Subcommittee, our involvement in the Delta Science Action Agenda, and her continued work to coordinate the Delta Invasive Species Coordination Team. Certainly happy to answer any questions if anybody has on any of that. Two more quick things on the program update. There was a nice article on Delta subsidence and carbon issues in Hothouse Solutions, a new publication. Just an extensive effort looking at all of the issues that we've been working on and the issues that we actually hope to put that money that we have potentially in the budget for nature-based solutions and climate action to work on the landscape out in the Delta. So if you get a chance, check out that article. Moving to board directives, there was only one board directive from the March meeting, and that was that we provide a list of the Delta drought response pilot projects, and that is actually included in your agenda, or under that item, and I'll be providing an update on that later on in the process. So that concludes the program element of the Executive Officer's report. Any questions or comments?
Yes,
Okay.
Question. So I like all these updates on the nutria situation, and the numbers are helpful, but I just like, how's it going?
It's actually going quite well. I think, I was trying to think of how to describe it, but there's invasive species curves and inflection points, and we seem to be maintaining and actually reducing the population.
Okay.
So I think we can safely say that the funding we're providing is really preventing an exponential increase in population.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah, and I think we're only at 2,500 since the inception, and that's just been very steadily growing, but at a very slow rate. So I think all the work to control those is paying off.
Any other questions on the program update? Anybody here or anybody on the phone?
All right, then I'm going to turn it over to Jessica for the budget.
Just going to remove my mask. I'm presenting the Delta Conservancy budget and expenditure report through the third quarter. It is very typical of our third quarter expenditure report at this time. Our salaries are at, typically at this point, expenditures are lagging a little behind because many of our expenditures are government. They just take a while to get to us. The only big change you're going to see is the Delta drought response reimbursement contract. We have a DWR, which is a $10 million contract, is now showing as a reimbursement on line 27. The costs associated with that includes $8 million of grants, which Campbell will report on later. That is also showing in the budget on line 24.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Any questions? Any questions on the phone? Budget report? Everybody's very agreeable this morning. So. Okay, all right. Thanks, Eddie. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Very good. Any public comments on any of those items? I didn't have anyone.
No public comment via email.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Okay. Then we'll,
For you to sit at the table?
Oh, no, I'll run the PowerPoints later, so I'm fine here. Thank you.
okay. Is it? Okay. All right. Then that takes us down to item number 6. How much consideration of Delta Conservancy draft 2022 implementation plan? So, and Cam, will turn to you again.
Great, thanks. I'll get the spotlight this morning. So this is an action item. I'm very pleased to present to you the draft 2022 implementation plan for the Delta Conservancy. It's actually in your packet located on page 13 of the complete board packet. So this is the companion document to our strategic plan and really our more detailed commitment of the work that we're going to do in this calendar year that links and supports the strategic plan. We typically bring the implementation plan to you in January for approval, but you may recall that we actually approved our new 5-year 2022 to 2027 strategic plan at the January meeting, and we wanted to take some time to make the implementation plan consistent with that newly approved plan. We had hoped to bring it to you in March, but due to staff constraints, we were not able to do that. So we are bringing to you today the draft plan for really what is the remainder of this calendar year. But it has been reformatted to be consistent with the strategic plan and in alignment with the strategic plan. Just a couple of quick highlights. The plan now for each of the tasks lists a timeline, but then it also does a nice job of linking the tasks directly to the objectives that are in the strategic plan, so it's a little easier to track how things fit together and how things go back to the approved strategic plan. One other note that obviously none of the funding that we've discussed so far for nature-based solutions is identified in the strategic plan, so as of July 1, things have changed dramatically. Everything that would be envisioned for that funding is actually included in the goals and objectives of the strategic plan. Just be a matter of the scale and speed with which we would be trying to move that funding. We are actively trying to figure out staff resources that we will need if that money hits on our doorstep. And we think we will need between 2 and 3 people, and we're trying to make sure that we're ready as soon as possible to do those recruitments and get those staff online in the event that that funding is realized. So I don't think I want to go through in any level of detail. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions about any of the tasks or items within the document, and then happy to entertain any thoughts or questions about it.
Okay, first here in the room, are there any questions or comments on the material? I don't see anybody on the phone? Okay.
Excellent. Well, we do have suggested motion language, just to move that the board approve the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy 2022 implementation plan as presented in this item.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and second, and I need to check and see if we have any public comment on this.
No public comment.
Anyone in the room? A member of the public? Okay.
Okay,
So-
roll call. Chair Natoli?
Aye.
Vice Chair Matsumoto?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller?
Yes.
No, loud and clear. Supervisor Mashburn?
Yes.
Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Board Member Gillahan?
Aye.
And Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Okay, 7 ayes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. With 8 ayes, it is so moved.
Okay, the motion was Mitchoff and second by Mashburn. You didn't have that, so.
I do, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. That's good. Okay, all right, moving right down our agenda, then it takes us to item 7, which is Prop 1 Ecosystem Restoration and Water Quality Grant Program update. So, and is Trevor doing this?
Dr. Trevor Fox
Dr.
is
Trevor
making
Fox.
his,
Dr. Fox, he's in the house.
making his debut at the Conservancy as our Prop 1 program.
Great, Trevor. Well, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, board members. I'm Trevor Fox, an environmental scientist here at the Delta Conservancy, and I'm here to present to you an update on the Proposition 1 projects and proposals so far. The Conservancy Cycle 5 full proposal solicitations closed this past December on the 15th, The Conservancy received 8 full proposals this cycle, requesting $4.7 million. And you can see those at Figure 1 on the attached board materials. The proposals have been scored internally by the Conservancy staff, but also by our expert reviewers. We will be getting, externally by expert reviewers, we will be getting first-hand look at each of these 7 project sites this month as we visit them and do our site visits. And the Conservancy staff will present the funding recommendations to you, the board, in July of 2022. As per our standard procedures, we notify a number of local community and interested parties of these recommendations. I'd like to highlight a few of the projects this time. We've provided the complete program update in the board materials. First up, we have the Delta Waterways Habitat Restoration Planning Project. That would be P1 1804, and that's on page 66.
I need to ask, Dr. Fox, please mute your phone, everyone on the line. We're getting some feedback here. Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Fox.
They won't pass, so.
Nope, still getting feedback. Please mute your phone.
They're talking to somebody, they're not listening.
Go ahead, try that.
All right, that's better, thank you.
Project 118, sorry.
Just the last look. Someone suddenly told us because that was just security.
You know,
I think it would be a lot louder to catch it.
There's somebody on the conference line that we're hearing their current conversation. Could you mute your phone if you're on the conference line?
We'll see.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, Dr. Fox, back to you.
Proposition 1, Project 1804, that would be on page 66 of your board packet. The grantee has submitted an amendment request to the budget, the scope, and the terms of the grant agreement. That would be agenda item number 7 for this meeting. For the project, the grantee is requesting board approval of findings for the project outside of the legal delta. And then next up, I'd like to take a look at the nutria eradication project, P1 1718, that's phase 1, and then phase 2, 1813. We've coordinated with the chair and the vice chair, and we've executed an amendment to this grant as of April 26, 2022. That would address the changes in budget caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The nutria detector dog subcontractor task has been moved from the nutria eradication project phase 1 on to phase 2. That was due to a delay in the need for the subcontractor services, again, as a result of the pandemic. Up next, the Marsh Creek Restoration Planning Project, P1 1809. The applicant for this project, American Rivers, has unfortunately had to withdraw their proposal for Cycle 4 funding. Due to a change, and this was due to a change in property ownership, and they were unable to secure a landowner letter of support to continue the project. And then finally, I'd like to highlight Project 1702. That would be the restoration planning at River Garden Farms. The plans for the wetland and riparian sites are complete, and the grantee is now seeking a consideration of the statutory exemption for a restoration site that is otherwise ready for project implementation. And then finally, since the last board meeting, there have been 9 projects that have closed out. The Conservancy staff are working on the internal administrative tasks related to that closing out. And as always, final reports are available by email with the Proposition 1 grant email that's at the bottom of this document, or the board document. At this point, I'm happy to take any questions or about the current Proposition 1 projects or the Cycle 5 solicitation update.
Okay, thanks, Trevor. Do we have questions? Yeah, Brian.
You said there were 5 projects that were completed?
9 total projects.
9 total projects. Okay. Do we have with the closeout, do we get like a report back on how the projects are how they did, were they successful, that type of thing?
We do have final reports for the projects that will be available.
Yeah, so if you look in that sheet, it does list where reports are available, and then we ask that if you're interested in looking at one, that you reach out to us, mostly due to accessibility issues and having them post on their websites.
But so far, everything looks good. The projects are doing what they're supposed to be doing. We're seeing results.
We're not aware of any project that's had significant failure or has not met their objective. So yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah, I just asked because, you know, construction costs are going up so much and everything. I was just a little concerned that.
I think we will see more amendments.
Yeah. So great. Glad to hear that.
And we are planning budgetarily through that to be able to accommodate that should that happen in the future. So we're not, with our Cycle 5 allocations and things like that, we're leaving room to make sure that we are able to still be successful given all those types of.
Excellent. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions around the table? Anybody on the phone have any questions or comments on any of the projects that were reported on or anything else that was in the report? Okay, hearing none. Any public commenters? Hope?
No public comment.
Okay. This is an update. It doesn't require
No,
action.
yeah, just
Okay,
an
great.
update.
Dr. Fox, thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you in the months ahead. Thanks. Okay, let's to our next item then, which is item number 8, which is our update on the Delta Drought Response Pilot Program. Yeah.
That's me again. Just want to kind of quickly give you all an update. You'll recall this was the program that we ran very quickly in the in the spring, to incentivize farmers to change practices on their lands to conserve water. Working with the Department of Water Resources, the Delta Water Master's Office, and the water user community, we designed the program and implemented it very quickly. Happy to say that we have now executed 33 grant agreements, enrolling about 8,800 acres and saving a rough approximation at this point of about 22,000 acre feet. It was a very successful program. It was a great opportunity to really get involved with the growers in the Delta and establish relationships. It is moving along. You'll remember too that it is a pilot program that's very much designed to help us understand which of these practices are most effective so that we can deploy them in the future. So we're using a tool called OpenET that actually will measure the evapotranspiration of fields, adjacent fields with different cropping patterns, and compare them against the fields where we have not been doing the irrigation as a result of this program or change practices. And then later in the agenda today, you will see a request to approve the UC Davis grant, which is the companion to this, which provides additional funding to do the more detailed meteorological monitoring with eddy covariance towers at 6 locations out in the Delta over the course of the next several years. Sadly, we are anticipating running this program again this year, and it will really again depend on the amount of funding that is in the budget. We have a planning call this afternoon to start to really dive into how we will structure that program this year. And one of the interesting things is we're also working with the Nature Conservancy in Audubon, California, and others to see if we can't blend the bird returns program with the Delta Drought Response Program. So you may recall we were active in the bird returns program last year, looking at the Delta as a place where we can provide wet habitat for shorebirds, probably one of the only places during the drought that we can provide that benefit. And there's a lot of overlap between these two programs and ways that we could combine practices to get the overall water savings compared to current crops, but also provide some of that wetted habitat for shorebirds and waterfowl. So we're excited about the prospect of really kind of thinking about what practices that we bring together and how we might run that program in a more coordinated way. And then you'll also notice that on page 43, we now have the full list of all 33 projects that includes the acreage, the dollar amount, the type, and who the actual project is with. Any questions?
Well, thank you, Campbell. Thanks for including the map as well. That was helpful to kind of see the geographical locations. I want to thank Vice Chair Matsumoto. I know certainly the committee was working very hard that was reviewing these, but I know that Sandy and I were, as the chair and vice chair, getting communications pretty rapidly and trying to respond to those to make sure that the projects received the necessary review and approval, but also that the program was in effect during the period of time when it was critical to implement it. So
yeah, thanks to you both, and thanks to staff, thanks to Hope for her Herculean work on managing all those grants and executing them, and everyone on staff who did that.
Okay, any questions, comments in the room?
I have one comment. I mean, 85 proposals in that short a time is really amazing. I mean, that to me is a big indicator of a lot of trust that you've built in the community. I mean, to have people scramble, learn about the program, and get those applications in is, I think it's very impressive. So I think that's really cool. And congrats to the staff for doing that. One question I have about the 22,000 acre feet, like I'm just trying to wrap my brain around what does that do for water quality wise? Like, maybe this gets into the UCD piece of this, but do we know anything about like what that does like, in terms of pushing out the salinity, or like what can you put that number in context a little bit?
It's challenging, right? The actual water quality benefit and/or the ecological benefit, it's a relatively small amount of water. So we can assume that it's not a huge impact, but we don't really have a way of directly measuring it. What we're trying to do is really think through, you know, which of these practices are most effective. There is quite a bit of analysis that will go on into trying to really understand how we would spend money in the future to get more water. I will also say that estimate is a conservative estimate. I mean, when farmers were telling us they would stop using 4.5 acre feet, but we sort of brought that back to 2.5 as a general average, so we'll be able to tighten up that number and better understand what the actual savings was, hopefully, overall. But it is challenging. I mean, I think it is a relatively small amount of water in a big tidal system that moves water at much greater quantity. But still, collectively, we think it's an important thing to do.
And one, I mean, it's definitely making things better. But is there any, and maybe this is the UCD question, the geographic location or kind of bundling of this?
Yes.
Are there benefits to that?
We tried to ensure that we had good distribution of practices as well as distribution within geographically in the Delta, and then to use these tools with UC Davis and OpenET to see where these practices are most effective as well as which practices are most effective.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Yeah, Jim?
Just a question. There's several that say eliminate or reduce irrigation and maximize soil cover. What does that entail, the maximizing soil?
Most commonly what it was foregoing planting of corn in the summer, but planting non-irrigated small grains in the spring. And then when it comes time to actually chop those, harvest them, to actually leave stubble behind. So you basically get that little bit of stubble plus the root mass that will hopefully hold the soil and just prevent it from blowing away through the course of the summer.
Thank you.
Oh, I think Don had to go take his call. We lost the chair.
Okay, great. So this is Sandy. I'm taking over. Chair Nicole had to step out. So we're on to agenda item 9, the community enhancement.
Before we do that, can I ask you a question?
Please, sorry.
Great, sure. Campbell, I'm not familiar with the details of the program, so the two questions I have would be, number one, is this a one-year deal only, or do you have the potential for arrangements which are invoked in future drought years or whatever triggers might happen? And then the second question is, to what extent do you think this is transportable to other agricultural regions, given Sandy's question about scale? It's going to be hard to get benefits, it's going to be hard to get really strong benefits unless it's across larger regions.
Right. So the answer to the first question is it was designed as a one-year program and designed to, again, help inform how we might manage drought in the future. Very quickly, we realized we're going to need to run it this year. And again, funding's in the budget, but the budget's not final. So we do expect to run it this year again. It's just really a matter of at what scale. To the second question, I think it's absolutely exportable. I think what we've learned is that the farmers would like this information, as well as the state wants this information, and when you offer a fair price, plus with the concern about not being able to grow as a result of curtailments, I think that's what motivated people to come in and participate in the program. So I think it's just really a matter of available funding and offering a price that's reasonable. We can do it throughout the valley, throughout California.
I mean, one thing about price and single versus multi-year arrangements is that your multi-year arrangements your initial investment may be bigger, but your actual cost is going to be much lower.
I think that's absolutely right. I think, this was run as an emergency drought response, so.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, now we'll move on to 9, the Community Enhancement Grant Program update.
Good morning, board members. My name is Martha Ozenoff, and I'm the Conservancy's Community Project Supervisor. I'm here to present Agenda Item 9, the Community Enhancement Grant Program Update, which is on page 29 of your agenda packet. Before I begin, I'd like to briefly note that we've changed the name of this report from the Proposition 68 update to the Community Enhancement Grant Program Update. This broader term refers to the collection of projects that support and enhance communities throughout the Delta, currently funded through Proposition 68 and the Climate Access and Restoration CAR Program Fund. This updated term allows us to embrace more funding sources going forward, tying updates to specific types of projects versus a particular funding source. To that end, I'm pleased to report that we have 5 executed grants, which are detailed on pages 49 to 51 of your agenda packet. All of the projects are current with the deliverables and making good progress. We've been checking in with them on a monthly basis. We also have 3 awarded projects that have yet to be executed. These projects were approved at the March board meeting, and we expect to have signed agreements in place by the beginning of July. For more information, please see pages 51 and 52 of your agenda packet. In addition to these projects, we have 3 working proposals, one of which, the Freeport Delta Gateway Monument Project, is before the board for consideration later in the agenda. The other 2 proposals are Project ID CAR 02, an implementation grant with the City of West Sacramento to complete the public access project at Pease Lakes, and CAR 03, a concept proposal with the Metropolitan Water District for a wetlands restoration project on Bolden Island. Details about these proposals can be found on the bottom of page 52 of your agenda packet. We anticipate bringing the Pease Lakes proposal to the July board meeting and the Metropolitan proposal in the coming months. Lastly, although not listed on the staff report, we have received interest from 4 community organizations indicating that they will be submitting concept proposals. 1 each from Yolo and Contra Costa County and 2 from San Joaquin County. With that, I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Martha. Any questions by folks here in the room? Anyone on? Oh, yeah, Jim, go ahead.
Just is that even with the pending projects? Then is that the rest of the money, or are there still funds available?
There's still funds available. There's approximately $5 million available, partly because for Prop 68, because we've shifted some of the funds from Prop 68 to the CAR funding, and so we did that intentionally. 1, to be able to get shovel-ready projects on the ground into the CAR general fund allocation, but also to free up more funding for Prop 68. Anticipating, 1, that we would have some concept proposals, and we do have 4 of them. We know folks are working on them. And then we also have several planning grants, and we're anticipating some implementation grants. We wouldn't have enough funding to fund everything, but that's our hope. We'd like to continue with some of those projects if they're viable.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Great. Any other questions? Anybody on the phone? Okay. If not, any public comment, Hope?
No public comment.
Okay, anybody here in the room? Very good. Okay, next one. Okay. That was
Number 9.
number 9. Okay, we'll go to number 9. Okay, then we're going to go to item number 10. Maybe you want to call that then, Jessica? I'm sorry. It's a request to approve interagency agreement with the Regents of the University of California to provide monitoring support for the Delta through response pilot program. And you alluded to this in your report a moment ago, so okay, that's the item. Great.
Good morning, Chair Natoli and board members. My name is Rachel Wigginton, and I'm a senior environmental scientist at the Delta Conservancy. This agenda item asks the board to consider a proposed interagency agreement with the Regents of the University of California in the amount of $1,497,611. The staff report and the proposed scope of work for the project can be found on pages 55 and 57, respectively, of your board packet. If approved by the board, these funds would support micrometeorological measurements and water budget calculations to evaluate water conservation practices in annual delta crops. Dr. Kosana Suvokarev, biometeorologist and assistant professor of cooperative extension at the Department of Land, Air, and Water Resources at the University of California, Davis, would lead this work. By taking detailed field-level measurements, Dr. Suvokarev and her colleagues will assess water use for different water conservation practices employed by Delta farmers. This improved understanding of the effectiveness of different conservation practices could be used to contextualize our assessment of the Delta Drought Response Pilot Program that Campbell spoke about before, and inform potential future iterations of that program. So that's a little bit of an overview, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time if folks have them.
I guess I have a question. So this is a significant sum of money. It's $1.5 million, and they'll monitor up to 6 fields. What is the duration of this? Because it's a lot of money. I mean, you can put a couple of people out for every day for a while and fund this. So I know there's obviously analysis that goes with it. So I guess I'm curious beyond what's in the staff report. What is the...
Absolutely. So the majority of the budget goes to purchasing 6 different eddy covariance towers that'll be put out into the field, and these are taking micrometeorological measurements, so essentially like field level measurements on a very high resolution basis. These are really expensive pieces of equipment. So those will be out there, and they will be out there for at least 2 full years. We're aiming for 3 years, but because of still pandemic things are hitting us, so supply chain issues, those eddy covariance towers and specific parts of them are back ordered, so we don't think we're going to actually get the equipment until later on this year. But we are confident that we'll have 2 full years of measurements, maybe a little bit more. And in addition to that, one of the co-PIs on the project, who is has modeling expertise, is going to start using some of the openly available data to create the models that we will then put the data that we take with these eddy covariance towers into. So it's a 3-year project total. Large majority of the money going to fund equipment purchases, but then also funding several different researchers and
So Rachel, who retains the equipment at the end of the pilot?
So at the end of the program, the way that we've set up the contract is similar to how we set up our Proposition 1 contracts, where we have deposition of equipment happening at the end of the contract period. So we have set it up, there's basically a 180-day period at the end of the contract where ourselves, DWR, and the University of California, Davis discuss how we're going to get rid of that equipment. So we've kind of put it off a little bit to future us, but the understanding being that we will all talk about it together and come to an agreement.
So is the equipment run its course? Is it useless at the end of the pilot? Or if not, then it would seem to me that we have an ongoing program here. 2 or 3 years of data is, that's important, but if you could, repurpose it or use it, you got to obviously have the staff behind it. It would seem to me that, just to kind of leave it open-ended.
I think all 3 are state agencies, and so it's a matter of just saying who's going to house it and protect it, and continue to use it into the future. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I would add that the contract language gives us the final option on what we want to do with it. So ultimately, we, the Conservancy, get to decide the way that it's written. We've just written it such that we all come back together at the end, assess the state of the equipment, how much it's actually worth at that time, and then what we want to do with it in the future.
Okay. All right, other members of the board, any questions?
I had a question.
Yeah.
Is the goal to validate OpenET at the field scale, or is it to understand the aggregate impact of the program? Or
I would say it's both. So I think both those things. So we have the first step of the process will be field selection. So site selection being one of the most complicated parts, I think, of any experiment. So working with the DRIP Oversight Committee that I sit on, as well as some of our other colleagues who helped with the DRIP selection, to pick those 6 fields. So as Campbell was speaking about earlier, we have some representative data about the different types of practices that people are employing. Additionally, thinking about geographic spread, is there difference in different parts of the Delta? So that's definitely one of our main objectives, is to understand how much water we're actually saving with these different practices. But then in addition, because we're using OpenET for the DRIP pilot program to assess the effectiveness there, wanting to really understand how these field level measurements can inform OpenET and improve the models. So Dr. Subakarev is in collaboration already with the OpenET developers. She works with them on several different projects. So it's a really ongoing collaborative relationship between herself and the OpenET folks.
I'm not understanding why. It seems like everybody, all the state agencies, the University of California will benefit from the research and information. Are we paying, is the Conservancy paying the whole cost, or are they contributing as well?
So there aren't any matching funds necessarily for this, but there are, I don't know if this is the technical term, but complementary funds that Dr. Subakarev has to support some student activities and a few of the research activities, but the majority of the funding from this is coming from the Conservancy, correct me if I'm wrong, Campbell, from the money that we got from DWR.
Right, DWR provided a $10 million grant, and then we put $8 million into the actual project's overhead, and then the cost of this contract was all incorporated into the expectation of that interagency agreement between DWR and ourselves.
So that was contemplated at the time DWR gave us the money?
Correct. Right.
Yeah, it's actually written into the interagency agreement from DWR that that's what they've specified for that.
Okay.
One follow-on, then, have we determined which fields? I mean, again, we saw the map earlier, so we have this geographical spread. There are different soil types, different water conditions, different cropping types throughout the Delta. So 6 will give you, I guess, a good sample, but so how's that being determined?
So that is the first task in the contract, is to choose the fields. And again, that will be done in collaboration with the DRIP Oversight Committee or any other body that we say should be involved in that selection. So if we wanted to add additional expertise or something like that, we still have that option. And so the UC Davis team will come meet with us and we'll work on that field selection process, definitely including some of the things that you just said, geographic spread, soil type, crop type, water conservation practices, trying to get it's definitely one of those experiments where you are taking a really deep set of measurements for fewer field sites as opposed to taking a lighter set of measurements for many different field sites. Just kind of a different approach to looking at things.
And the one thing I would add too that's kind of nice about this is there's already an array of 6 or 7 eddy covariance towers out there already. These are the same instruments that have been used to really characterize the gas flux with subsidence and carbon emissions. And so we're tapping in, we expect to tap into them for their data sets as well, so that actually broadens the overall array. So that'll be better for baseline information for surrounding crops there. Okay.
And then as we're able to see how it does validate the OpenET, that will really inform, do we need to continue doing this level of monitoring, or is OpenET, in what situation, is it really validating and give us good data? And then just to comment on the data as well, is that throughout this whole thing, it's been very important to us and to DWR as well, that data is all very publicly accessible. Yes. And soon. It's not data that we're going to take and vet and massage for a year and then release. It's going to be released as soon as possible so that people can have the benefit of that.
And so the farmers and landowners knew as a part of accepting money that they might be part of the pilot that then would have additional level of scrutiny on their field, their farming practice? They all know that?
Absolutely. It's in their grant agreements.
Okay.
And they've been very willing because they really want to have that data as well.
Yes.
And Dr. Subakarev did share that she works with other farmers doing very similar things, different crop types, different types of approaches, but that usually they're very interested in getting this sort of data. So she has experience helping them understand the data that she's getting and sharing some of that with them. So they're getting a benefit as well to hosting this equipment on their fields.
Great. Okay. Anybody else around the table? If not, then on the phone, are there any questions or comments regarding this item? Folks on the phone? Okay. All right. Hearing none.
Do you want to read the motion?
Yeah, I'm happy to read the suggested motion language.
Yeah, this one, it seems to hang on a second. Is there any public comment? Oh,
No,
okay. Go ahead, Dr.
I move the board authorize the executive officer to enter into an interagency agreement with the Regents of the University of California to provide monitoring support for the Delta Drought Response Pilot Program.
Okay.
So move.
All right.
Second.
All right. Moved by Mashburn, second by Mitchoff. Any further comments about the motion? Anybody on the phone? All right. If not, then we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Go ahead, Jessica.
Okay, Supervisor, Chair Natoli?
Aye.
Vice Chair Matsumoto?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchoff?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller? Kathy?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Supervisor Mashburn?
Yes.
Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Board Member Gillihan?
Aye.
Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Wittmanitz and Sandoval are absent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Carries with 8 votes. Mitchoff first and Mashburn second. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, then go down to our next item, item 11, which is consideration of the award of a Prop 68 Community and Economic Enhancement grant for the Freeport Delta Gateway Monuments Planning Project. And Martha has been working on this with our folks we have here today and some on the phone as well. So
I'm finally happy to have an answer for you. So, good morning. In follow-up to the Community Enhancement Grant Program update, I'm very pleased to present for board consideration a recommendation to award Proposition 68 funding for the Freeport Delta Gateways Monument Planning Project. This item can be found on pages 62 to 65 of your agenda packet. Conservancy staff recommends that the board approve up to $223,277 and grant funding for this proposal, the purpose of which is to complete the planning phase of a 2-phase project that will ultimately install 2 gateway monuments and 1 interpretive sign in the unincorporated community of Freeport. This planning project is not considered a project under CEQA, although the proposed project does include the completion of the CEQA documents for the implementation phase of the project. Additionally, this project is located in a severely disadvantaged community and is expected to support that community through increased economic activity and tourism. Lastly, although the County of Sacramento will not contribute cost share, it is important to note that this project has secured commitments of time, labor, and in-kind donations. The project enjoys considerable backing from the community, as evidenced by 18 letters of support from local businesses, community organizations, and area governments.
it's almost a whole town.
Yeah. It's very impressive, I have to say. Our staff is pleased to recommend this project for board approval, noting that there's suggested motion language at the bottom of the agenda item for your consideration. But before we proceed, I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay. Thanks, Martha. Let me turn to board members. Any questions or comments around the table?
What are the monuments?
I know, I was wondering if anybody knew what a gateway monument is.
Yeah.
When you drive into town, if you notice on the side of the road, of certain places will be like, welcome to Davis, or welcome to, I think we're familiar with the monument that goes, gateway monument that goes over, welcome to Lodi, the arch. And there was previously, back, Janet could speak to this, but back in the earlier times, let's just say that I can remember when it was, there was a gateway monument that welcomed everybody to Freeport. And then it's been since demolished, and they're not able to do an arch over. Caltrans won't allow that anymore, but they're talking about doing a freestanding structure on the side of the road to demarc when you come into Freeport. And then there's going to be another one talking about how it's the entrance, the northern entrance to the Delta, and some interpretive signage. Freeport's got a really interesting history. So, and we're hoping to bring in more folks as they sort of come in to recreate, stop in Freeport, and use the facilities, the restaurants and stuff like that. So, hoping to mark the place that way. And then, yeah, so those are the two.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it was formerly the Victory Highway, and I know that working with the city of Sacramento some years ago, there was a row of trees that long since disappeared, and in addition to the archway. And so the idea is that because it is one of the northern gateways into the Delta, certainly it provides access to a lot of Delta communities, is to, one, I think, make good solid recognition of that. And as the city of Sacramento has continued to grow, as you're all well aware, if you traveled on I-5, the Delta Shores project comes right to town of Freeport. The identity is really important to retain it for the legacy town, but also I think some of the economic development, certainly the tourism, whether it's environmental tourism, ag tourism, recreational uses. So that's the whole idea behind the concept. And I would just say I want to thank certainly Janet and Bob, who spearheaded it with the Freeport Town Association, and I know Kevin Bieske is County of Sacramento was taking on the assignment as he came to the county here some months ago, and have really actively pursued this. So the opportunity, I think, avails itself, and we're, I know I've been kept apprised of the project, so very appreciative of Martha's work, and certainly Janet, Bob, and others in the town. So, okay. Any other questions from folks around the table? If not, anybody on the phone, any questions or comments on the item that is before us? Okay. If not, any public comment in advance of the consideration of the motion?
No public comment.
Okay. As chair, I would move the item as recommended. Thanks to all involved, and look forward to the.
I'll second that.
Would you like me to read the motion?
Sure, you can read it. Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
since we wrote it out. And it's in such easy language to read. Exactly. Move to award funding up to $223,277 to the County of Sacramento from the Proposition 68 Community and Economic Enhancement Grant Program for the Freeport Delta Gateway Monuments Project.
Great, that's the motion. And Jim,
I second it.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I have a motion by Supervisor Natoli, a second by Supervisor Provenza. Can I have your vote, Supervisor Natoli?
Aye.
Vice Chair Matsumoto?
Yes?
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller?
Yes.
Oh. Supervisor Mashburn?
Yes.
Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Board Member Gillihan?
Aye.
And Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries with 8 ayes.
Great.
Wonderful. If I could just take a quick moment, I'd like to introduce Janet Lake from the Freeport Citizens Community Advisory Committee to say just a few words.
Yeah, hi, I'm Janet from Freeport Community Citizens, and I want to thank you all, right, on behalf of the Freeport, Town of Freeport, and the community of South Sacramento. Really appreciate it. It also has national significance because that was the last leg of the highway. We didn't have a highway across America after World War I, and so from Freeport to San Francisco, that is the last leg of the highway that completed that. So it's of national significance. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Janet, and again, thanks for your leadership and ongoing work. And Kevin, you're on the phone. Did you want to add anything?
I'm excited to work on the project. It's really a fun project that the Department of Transportation gets to take on. So I'm excited to see what these gateways look like and all the community outreach we're going to do to get them figured out and get exactly what the community wants. Thank you.
That's great, Kevin. And again, with the natural heritage area management plan moving forward, obviously, Freeport, with any other Delta communities will be a part of that as well. So, okay, very good. Well, thank you, Janet. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks you all. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you. I noticed on the map it shows a Delta Gateway sign at Conservancy River and Freeport. Is that part of this, or?
I'm sorry.
What was the question? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just noticed that there was a Delta Gateway sign also. Is that included in this, or is that a different project?
It's the same project.
Oh, same project. Okay.
Oh, you mean the one on the map here? Yes.
Yeah.
That is the same project.
We just added the word to be confusing, but.
No, it's okay. I'm in favor. I think it's great.
Good.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
I just walked from pocket area to Freeport a couple weeks ago.
You did?
Didn't intend to, but I was looking for a place to buy water. There's no place to buy it worth the
Did you find it when you got to
So
Freeport?
you kept going.
Yeah, I walked all the way to
find
Freeport.
water.
I bought it. I got the best water bottle ever.
Well, I'm glad you survived the trek.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, well, that's great. And did you have to walk back, or were you getting?
I did.
Okay, very good. Okay, all right, then, next we'll move to the item number 12, which was a consideration of amendment to the budget scope and term of a Prop 1 consists of restoration of water quality grant program for the Delta Working Waterways Habitat Restoration Planning Project. So, and I think Sarah's going to do this.
Okay.
Sarah, good morning.
Good morning, board members. My name is Sarah Lesmeister, and I'm here presenting agenda item 12. It's a request for the consideration of an amendment to Delta Working Waterways Habitat Restoration Planning Project. The staff report for this amendment is on page 66 of the board packet. This agenda item presents two different items. First one is for project sites located outside of the legal delta, and two, a request to amend the budget, scope, and extend the term of the grant agreement. This is the first amendment for this project. So for our recommendation, our staff's recommendation is that the board approves findings for the project sites located outside of the delta and approve the amended budget, scope, and term extension. So just some background about the project. In May of 2019, as part of the Cycle 4 for the Proposition 1 grant program, the board awarded grant funds for the Delta Working Waterways Habitat Restoration Planning Project. The objective of this planning project has been to develop shovel-ready design plans and secure all necessary permits in order to mimic or restore the functions of floodplains, riparian forests, and wetlands. Project implementation will provide tangible habitat and water quality benefits, create corridors between historic marshland and upland habitat, and contribute to the economic and environmental sustainability of working agricultural lands. One of the project sites, Ulatis Creek, has completed shovel-ready designs and has submitted a implementation proposal through our Cycle 5 Proposition 1 solicitation. So the first part of this amendment request is related to the budget. Normally, this type of request would not require a budget, or would not trigger an amendment. However, in the context with the other changes requested, I'm outlining the request here. In short, the grantee does not request to change the total grant award. However, they want to shift approximately $52,200 from subcontractors and general operating expenses to the personnel services and the resultant impacts to indirect cost. The second part of the grantee's amendment request is a term extension. Similar to the budget, this type of change would not normally trigger an amendment consideration with the board. The grantee requests a term extension of approximately 15 months from November 2022 to March 2024. The grantee's request for a term extension is a result of reluctance of previously identified landowners to commit to these planning projects amid the economic and social uncertainty surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. The third element of the grantee's amendment request is to the project scope. The original sites proposed for this project were all located within the legal delta. However, the grantee has identified other potential project sites just outside the legal delta that would result in, among other benefits, exclusion of livestock from the waterways. Per the proposal requirements outlined in the Delta Conservancy's grant guidelines, the grantee provided a Delta benefits justification with their amendment request. The expanded project sites would be located within 5 miles of the legal delta, be along waterways that drain into the delta, and have water quality benefits. So our Public Resources Code section 3236.0.5 requires that the board make certain findings if it approves funding for activities outside the delta. In the staff report, there are detailed findings, but I will highlight here kind of a summary of the findings from this request. So the project implements the ecosystem goals of the Delta Plan is consistent with all required state and federal permits. The Conservancy has conducted required notifications and has addressed comments which include coordination with the Coastal Conservancy where our jurisdiction overlaps. And the project will provide significant benefits to the Delta. Approval of this amendment will allow the grantee to complete restoration planning for 8 project sites as proposed in their awarded project. The risks associated with not approving this amendment are that the planning project is unlikely to result planning documents for the 8 restoration sites in agricultural lands. Staff feels that this project should continue and are confident with the approval of this amendment would not fundamentally change the merit of the competitive nature in which this proposal was initially evaluated. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. Questions? Mitch, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. Anybody around the table? Any questions? Okay, anybody on the phone? Any questions or comments on this? All right, hearing none. Do we have any public comment?
You have public comment.
Okay, no one in the room wish to address this, so we do have the recommendation, so you want to go ahead and read the suggested motion into the
Absolutely.
record,
Can we
please?
read the suggested motion? So there are two separate motions that are required. The first one, move that the board approve findings for project sites located outside the legal delta for the Delta Working Waterways Habitat Restoration Planning Project Grant Agreement with Solano County Resource Conservation District.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mashburn, seconded by Mitchoff. Nothing further on the motion. Please call the roll, Jessica.
Okay, Supervisor, Chair Natoli?
Aye.
Vice Chair Matsumoto?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchoff?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller? Kathy? I'll come back to Kathy. Supervisor Mashburn?
Yes.
Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Board Member Gillihan?
Aye.
And Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Supervisor Miller, are you on the line?
The next one's we're going to go to July.
Kathy?
Yes, I'm sorry, I had to take another call, and my vote is yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 8 ayes. The motion carries.
Okay, so the second motion, move that the board approve an amendment to the grant agreement with Solano County Resource Conservation District for Proposition 1, 1804, to shift funds across budget line items, allow project sites outside of the legal delta, and extend the grant term to March 15th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, once again, moved by Mashburn, second by Mitchoff. The motion is in the record. Any comments or questions on the motion? Any public comments, Hope?
No.
Okay, and anybody on the phone? All right, if not, then Jessica, please call the roll.
Chair Natoli?
Aye.
Vice Chair Matsumoto?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchoff?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller?
She went back on her call.
Okay. Supervisor Mashburn?
Yes.
Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Board Member Gillihan?
Aye.
And Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Supervisor Miller, are you on the line? We will put her as an abstain. We have
Yes, I am here.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And you're
I'm
voting
trying to
no?
juggle 2 calls right now.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Kathy. Okay.
Was that an aye vote, Kathy?
Yes.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
So much. Great. Got it.
All right, Ken. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so item 13, we're going to continue until July. Do we need a motion to continue, or is it just drop from the
I think we
agenda?
just pull it from the agenda.
Okay. All right, so we'll just, we're going to drop from the agenda item 13, and we'll reappear for our July meeting. So with that, then we're going to move down to item 14, which is overview of the Reorienting to Recovery for the California Central Valley Salmon Recovery Project. And our presenter, okay, we have our presenters here in the room, so you can join us at the table if you'd like.
Thank you.
Welcome, Gary. And
Yeah, Gary, you can see Gary again.
see.
We can move that chair or use that chair.
So we have Gary Balker and Lindsay Kribo here today with us, and good to see both of you. I think Hope has it loaded up, so.
So, thanks everyone. Nice to see at least the eyes of people that I've seen before. I'm Gary Bacher. I'm the program director at the Bay Institute and one of the members of the project team for Reorienting to Recovery. I'm with Lindsay Triba, who's with Kearns and West, one of the main support teams that is behind the project. So let's go to the next slide. So This is actually the last of a series of dog and pony presentations that we've been doing, probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 dozen of them now. It's basically a coming attractions trailer to try and just get it in front of folks, let them know what's going on, give a 30,000-foot overview, outline how hopefully you or some representative can get involved, and then have a quick Q&A, and then there's plenty of engagement opportunities to come. So let's go to the next slide. So, I don't know, with my aging eyes, it's hard to read that. Hopefully, all of this stuff will be available. We can send it to you, and it's also available on the website. But this project, Reorienting Recovery, came out of the Collaborative Science and Adaptive Management Program, which is a consortium of a number of state and federal agencies, nonprofit environmental and fishing groups, water districts, and other interests that have been focused on trying to narrow our differences and improve our scientific understanding of the needs of endangered species. And a couple of years ago, we decided to pivot from focusing on and fighting over the science behind things like pumping restrictions in the Delta to say, look, let's see if we can agree about the science and the actions necessary to actually recover salmon. And when I say recover salmon, I don't mean just delist them. I mean actually a broad sense recovery, which is how can we actually recover salmon to the point where they can support a whole bunch of different environmental, cultural, social, and economic purposes. So listed there is just some of the agencies involved in CSAMP, and then on the right, the actual planning team members, which include folks from the Bay Institute, Trout Unlimited, Metropolitan Water District, Santa Clara Valley, et cetera. So let's go to the next slide. The salmon recovery project is in 3 phases. The first phase is, so we're talking about broad sense salmon recovery, but what the heck does that mean? So we convened some of the best salmon experts in the state in a series, 2 multi-day series of workshops in June and October of 2021 to actually define what can science tell us about what salmon, how do you define salmon recovery in a meaningful way, how do you measure it, what do we understand when we say salmon recovery. The final report on the salmon recovery definition framework was released in March, and it's on our website, and I'll talk about it a little bit in a second. Phase 2, which is what we're starting now, is starting the engagement process and the data collection process. Essentially, we want folks to tell us what actions are out there that we should be looking at to help salmonids throughout the Central Valley. What data should we be looking at in addition to the vast amount of data that we have? And what do you care about? When we talk about recovering salmon, what does that mean to you? You know, in addition to what the scientists say, what does it mean to you as a member of the community that cares about salmonids? And then we're going to take all that information and put it into a structured decision-making process starting the end of this year, where what we'll actually do is go through this iterative process of modeling. Okay, how do all of these actions that people have identified, actions that we reasonably expect to happen, what are they going to get us towards salmon recovery? How that's going to affect not only the scientific definition of recovery, but the cultural and economic definition of recovery, and how far short do we fall, and what do we need to do, with the idea that at the end, by mid-2024, hopefully we can identify a strategy that's an effective, efficient, broadly supported strategy of actions, a suite of actions that are the most effective in achieving salmon recovery and that people can actually get behind. That's the goal. Next slide, please. So one of the things is, you know, any of you that have been involved in any efforts on salmon recovery know there's a lot going on there. So who needs our project? You know, what value does it add? What we're trying to do is stitch together a lot of different things that are going on, because there's a huge amount of activity going on for salmonids and other fish and wildlife. But what we're doing first is we want to set targets that govern all of these actions so that our salmon recovery definition is actually driving all of these actions and where success is measured by that. We want to look at the entire salmon life cycle, because there's a lot of great stuff going on, but it only deals maybe with where fish are spawning, or where they're rearing, or where they're migrating out to the ocean, et cetera. We want to knit all those things together into one strategy. There's some really good tools, and we're not reinventing the wheel in that. We're taking existing models, specifically the Central Valley CVPI SIT model, it's called, and the NIMS Winter Run Life Cycle model, the two major tools that we have for salmonids. We're going to use them, only we're going to use them for broader purposes than they're currently being used, because they're going to look at all the different actions in all the different life stages to achieve these broad objectives. So we're building on that, but we're using them in an innovative way. All actions are on the table, because we want to get a sense of, what do we get when we do all of these different things? And like I said, where does that leave us? And this is not, even though this came out of that CSAM process, we're not privileging the folks that are in the CSAM process. We're trying to make sure that whether you're in the Delta, you're a tribal community, you're a community of color, you're on the coast, you're in the watershed, that you have equal access to the process. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to very briefly go through what we found with the recovery definition, just so you know what we're talking about. And then Lindsay's going to walk us through kind of what we're doing in terms of stakeholder engagement and phases 2 and 3 of the process. So in phase 1, next slide. This is just to show you the folks that the CSAMP agency has sort of identified leading salmon scientists that either work for them or that we wanted to be in the process, and these were all involved in a series of workshops. Next slide. And essentially what that group did was it agreed to use the viable salmon, what's called VSP parameters, viable salmonid population parameters, which essentially is abundance, productivity, diversity, and spatial structure. And then to identify, okay, what do we mean by that? How do you define it? What are the metrics that are associated with it? What are the targets? In other words, what are the values that say we have enough, we have enough salmon, their growth is at a healthy rate, they're distributed amongst the landscape in a way that reduces their vulnerability to extinction, et cetera. They're genetically diverse, so that no matter what, in terms of changing climate and all of the stresses that brings, that they're actually able to be resilient. So, so that group prepared a report, which essentially has a framework which establishes those measurable objectives, the metrics that should be used, and the targets to the extent that we're able to identify targets at a landscape level. But what we really are going to need to do is then go into each watershed and say, okay, give us your watershed-specific information so that we can now set watershed-specific targets for each of these watersheds. Like I said, the idea is to go beyond delisting. So the kinds of targets we're talking about, things like abundance, really, science can't tell you how many fish you want. It can say how many fish you need to avoid extinction. But how many fish do you want if what you care about is a healthy offshore fishery? Or enough food so that folks who depend on salmon and other fish as subsistence fishers can survive. Or because you really just like having fish and you want to be able to bring your kids to a river and see fish spawn. Whatever your value is. How do we incorporate that? Those are values that need to then be incorporated on top of this scientific definition. And then finally, in setting those targets, there are a number of things that we needed to do. We needed to try to make a distinction between wild fish and hatchery origin fish. We needed to deal with specific runs, and not just specific runs, but different types of salmonids too, not only Chinook salmon, but steelhead as well. And to make sure that we're dealing not just with the listed species, which get the bulk of the attention, but non-listed species, which includes the fall run, which is the most commercially important. So next slide.
Gary, just a quick question. So how far up the watershed, do you go to the upper reaches of the watershed with your, your work and your consideration of ways to recover?
Yeah, and we may even have a slide that shows, do we have that slide that shows all the, yeah, so you'll see the diversity of the groups we've reached out to. And one of the things that we've been trying to do, I mean, given that, so we're a project now of the Delta Science Program, right, which provided the bulk of the funding. And, and the funds aren't unlimited. So how do we reach all these people but yet get the job done, especially since our final report is due in mid-2024. One of the things we're trying to do is use regional entities, which is why, the Delta Conservancy is a great example. It's like you knit together a lot of different interests, and if we can find, instead of having, 40 people show up, if we have a few people who show up who, work for or with the Conservancy, it's a great way to sort of bundle interests and knowledge and be efficient in trying to organize work groups in the future, et cetera. And that's what Lindsay's going to get into, exactly how we're sort of organizing that. So.
All right, thank you, Gary. Hi, everyone. As Gary mentioned, my name is Lindsay Triba, and I'm an associate with Kearns & West in Sacramento. And our firm is helping with some of the facilitation and outreach engagement work. So we'll get into it here with phases 2 and 3 of our engagement plan. So next slide, please. So here is a bit of an overview of what we've done so far in phase 2. And as Gary mentioned, phase 2 started in January of this year. So we've already given 20 different presentations, similar to the one we're giving today, to 20 different associations and interest-based groups throughout Central Valley. And I'll show you those associations on the next slide. We've also provided 2 deep dive webinars open to the public, both in March, and those were led by our planning team, where they were able to really go into the project details, the types of modeling efforts that we'll get into, and of course answer any questions. Now, we're currently soliciting input on 2 major items, the project catalog and the watershed data spreadsheet, and again, I'll provide more detail on that. But it's important to note that those have been distributed, and we're soliciting those information now for the next several weeks to the next month and a half. And again, I'll provide more information on the next couple of slides. Now, I'm also here to encourage you today to attend some of our upcoming meetings. So we have one upcoming meeting, which is an orientation to engaging with California tribes. That is not listed on the PowerPoint you are seeing right now, because this just was announced yesterday, so hot off the presses for you all. But I do have the Zoom link and information available. If you're interested in attending, it is on June 1st from 12 to 12:45, so a lunch brown bag series. And that's hosted by our partner in the project, the California Indian Environmental Alliance, or SIA, led by Sherry Norris. And she's also invited a tribal representative, Crystal Moreno with the Shingle Springs Rancheria, to lead that effort. And now I'm also going to invite you to our upcoming virtual kickoff meeting series. And here it's going to be a 3-part series in June. Each of these meetings will cover different information, and they will build on each other. So we encourage you to attend as many meetings as you can. But if you can only attend 1 or 2, you're welcome to join, even if you can't make all 3. And those are shown at the bottom of the slide below. We are requesting that folks register in advance. Our registration for that is online on our website, and our website is listed on the Delta Conservancy website in the meeting agenda packets as well. And at that meeting, we're going to be covering some stories, values, interests, and perspectives. We're going to discuss that as a group and try to understand how we can bring those values into our evaluation efforts for phase 3. And again, we're inviting our technical scientists to that, as well as state and federal agencies, public water agencies, environmental NGOs, and working with our tribal partner to coordinate inviting tribal representatives as well. So on the next slide, you'll see all of our phase 2 engagement and outreach efforts. I know for those in the room, the font is a little small there, so you can see this later on as well. But it's important to note that we've presented to 20 different associations, representing about 14 different watersheds, going all the way from the McCloud River to the San Francisco Bay, essentially. So these are the associations that we've already been working with. It covers close to 200 people across the region. But if you see that today and you're thinking that we've missed someone, please let us know, because we understand we're trying to stitch together such a huge region, and if we've missed someone, we want to hear their voices as well. Our efforts only going to be...
Footnote on that is that a lot of the entities we picked here were picked in part because they bundle a lot of folks. So if you think of somebody also, it may be that we've actually captured, I mean, please let us know, but it may be we've captured them already because a lot of these, like this group, incorporate a lot of different entities.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Absolutely. So feel free to think about it and let us know after this presentation as well. Some of you may have already been involved in those presentations we've given over the past several months. Now, next slide, please. Here's the information that we've already begun requesting. There are three main things here: values, watershed-specific data, and our project catalog. So we have started distributing this information. As I get into it, if you realize that you've not already received this information, that's no problem. There's still plenty of time to comment on it. It just means that you're not already on our project distribution list, and we want to get you on that as soon as possible. So first up with the values, we are requesting values, which can be scientific values, but right now we're really focusing on socioeconomic values, political values, tribal cultural values, and kind of that softer side that's less focused on the technical work. And we're soliciting that information via our kickoff registration. So as soon as you register for our kickoff meetings, you fill out that value questionnaire, and we receive that information to then guide our kickoff meetings. The next two are part of a workbook that we've distributed, one on watershed-specific data. So as you recall from Gary's presentation on our recovery framework definition, a lot of scientific data already went into this. As Gary mentioned, we're using both the SIT and the life cycle model, the two predominant salmonid models available to us. But we recognize that there are going to be some gaps. So if you see some gaps and you would like to provide us with modifications specific to your watershed, we're soliciting all of that information, changes you might see, other relevant information, anything like that. And finally, our project catalog. We have a project catalog that has been pre-populated specifically for our effort by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So huge thank you to CDFW for that. It includes over 200 different salmon-related recovery efforts and projects throughout the Central Valley. So we ask you to take a look at that, find your project, fill in any information you think is relevant, and of course if you don't already see your project or your effort listed, we ask you to then add it so that we can keep a record of that. And we'll be creating an interactive model of all of the projects that folks can be using in the next year or two. And of course, these projects are going to be modeled in our scenarios in Phase 3, which gets to our Phase 3 recap. So there are going to be different engagement efforts that you can participate in. I'll run through these quickly. So we have a science team. You can think of this as kind of the most highly intense, high commitment of all of our asks. So we're bringing back our Phase 1 workshop participants, and we're inviting new watershed scientists and, of course, tribal and cultural scientists and experts, and asking folks to provide technical advice on our modeling and scenarios. So again, highest intensity. Then next we have our forum. This is going to be the lowest intensity, where it's just kind of getting on our distribution list, staying informed, and then we'll reach out to you to provide information throughout all phases of our project. And then finally we have the working group, and that is kind of a compilation of the forum with folks who want to be even more invested in what's coming down to our structured decision-making, or SDM process, and that's really going to be refining our scenarios and providing feedback on that. So that's a high-level overview. You don't have to remember all that today. We will be discussing it in detail at the kickoff meeting, but just a coming attractions trail on that. Next slide, please. I recognize this is going to be very difficult to see for those in the room, so I'll just give you a brief rundown. All you really need to know here is that we are on track for our Phase 2 roadmap timeline, and we're well on our way to being ready for Phase 3. And at the bottom, there's some white boxes there. Really, all that's trying to tell you is that first, we're going to be running baseline models. Second, we're going to go through several rounds of discussing scenarios. And then third, we're going to be engaging our structured decision-making team and our working groups to provide feedback. And then finally, we hope to have a beautiful suite of actions that we can then present to CSAMP to kind of consider for implementation down the road. But right now, you know, it's a long way to get there, and we're really taking this process to be more creative and interdisciplinary and collaborative as possible. All right, next and final slide here. Again, a lot of information was given today, but really the push here is to get you guys to come to our virtual kickoff meeting series and that orientation to engaging with tribes beforehand. If you are interested, the dates are listed there. It's going to be June 7th, June 8th, and June 16th, and all times are from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And again, that is virtual. They will build on each other, so please attend as many as you can. And registration, again, is on our website, which is listed at the bottom of the slide, and is also listed on the agenda packet materials for this meeting. Lastly, we are, we're soliciting input for our project catalog and watershed data. If you realize you've not received that workbook yet, but you want to provide information, that is not on our website because it's not publicly available. So email me after this meeting, and I'm happy to send that your way. All right, folks, that's a lot of information. So thank you very much for inviting us to hear this presentation. And if there is time, we're happy to answer questions now or push those for later on.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Gary. It just comes to mind, and again, I understand you bridge this with folks that have multiple representation layers, but I would suggest that the Delta Counties Coalition should at least be on your list. You have all the supervisors and counties are represented, obviously, in the Conservancy body, certainly with the Protection Commission. But all those watersheds, at least in the central part of your study area, are represented by those elected bodies, and certainly have an interest in water quality, watershed health, obviously the fisheries, and I think the work that you've outlined here. So I would suggest getting that coalition listed on your invitee list, and maybe they already are, I don't know. But I often now you got 4 million people represented in all the Delta counties represented, certainly the Sacramento-San Joaquin watershed.
Yeah, I mean, we're happy to add them to the distribution list and to reach out to see if there's any follow-up that any of the folks in the coalition want.
Right. But obviously, this is a big undertaking, so your outreach is pretty impressive when you're going from basically the Oregon border to, the middle portion of the San Joaquin Valley. That's a lot of coverage from the Sierras to the sea. So. Anyway, let me go to my colleagues here, board members. Yeah, Mitch?
I couldn't really see your list, but I was just curious if Yoto Dehe Winton Nation is one of the groups that you might be outreaching to. They are the native group who sits right on Cache Creek over in Yolo County.
That's a great suggestion.
I would suggest that, and I would also suggest you reach out to the Solano County Water Agency. Pewter Creek flows right down from Berryessa right into the delta there, and we have a significant salmon run the last 2 years because we still have cold water coming down out of Berryessa. And so I would highly recommend you contact Solano County Water Agency as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for that suggestion. Just to cover the first one, with all of our tribal outreach, we have outreach to some tribes individually, but we're relying heavily on our partner, CIA, the California Indian Environmental Alliance. So I imagine that tribe is on their list, but I'll follow up with them and just make sure that they have that covered. And then on the second part, Solano County Water Agency, we have reached out to, as well as the Pewter Creek Council, if you're familiar with that. So we're trying to get all those folks involved as well. But I've made a note of both of those to follow up, so that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Others around the table or in the room? Eric, Eric, did you have your hand? No. Okay, good. Yeah, Jim, go ahead.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I think it's very much needed, and bringing all the disparate elements together. I was interested in kind of the definition of recovery. I guess that's one of your goals to define it. And one of the things that came to my mind is if you were to ask me, my definition would be, in absence of anything else, let's go back to before the Europeans came to California. Let's have that. Let's have the gold standard. But then I'd have to ask, well, what's the cost? Is it $1 trillion a day? Then maybe we can't do that. What's the impact on other things like agriculture and other species, in terms of actions that we take? And so does the definition of recovery, is that affected by the overall impact of the efforts, or is that done separately, a separate part of the process?
So I would say it's a great question, and it gets to the heart of why we're doing it the way we're doing it, because this is not a regulatory or statutory process, and it's not linked to any existing regulatory or statutory process, because what we don't want to get wrapped around the axle of is talking about salmon recovery
as a requirement. Now, my group, or your group, or the county, or a water district may have a very different ideas about what the requirements are. And okay, that's a different venue. What we're saying is basically, what does science tell us about salmon recovery? Then layer on top of it, what do different affected interests feel about salmon recovery? What do they want from salmon recovery? And then what we're going to do is essentially try to find a sweet spot among different actions to see how far we can get toward that. We're not saying we have to reach it. I mean, there's no penalty for not reaching it. So we're not going to get too hung up on redefining the definition based on those feasibility considerations. The feasibility considerations will affect what is the actual suite of actions we all get behind in the end, right? And it may be that that suite of actions includes many, but not all of the things that people want to do. That there's some things, I anticipate that we're not going to, in this process, we're not going to come to agreement over how to operate Shasta Dam for cold water, That's going to be fought in a different venue. But maybe we can agree that there are projects we can do to achieve fish passage above dams that alleviate some of the pressure on facilities like Shasta to maintain cold water, right? So there are ways that we can address those. So it's a sort of a long-winded way of getting at, essentially, the feasibility issues come into the analysis we do, and then how we use that analysis to prioritize a suite of actions that is the most effective together, and it gets us as far as we get. And one other question I had is, one of the things on my mind all the time is it seems like whenever we make progress, then the drought is worse than it's ever been, or climate change is faster than it's ever changed. How do you keep up with that, with those two areas in this analysis?
Yeah.
The Red Queen hypothesis is what they call that in science, from Alice in Wonderland, right? So, that was very much on the mind of the scientists in phase one, was that in addition to sort of saying, okay, here's what biology tells us about sort of the attributes of a healthy salmon population, that one of the biggest attributes is resilience to climate change. So how do we do that? So part of what I think the thinking is going to be going into phase three, the actual modeling, is to see, how much can you do things like expand salmonids into areas where we're able to maintain temperatures better, or to take actions that actually create habitat that is actually able to maintain temperatures better. Just to give you a primary example of what's likely to be a driver in terms of climate change. I mean, temperature is probably the biggest stressor that we're looking at in terms of new stressors on the system. Thank you. And it's a tall order. We're not. I mean, this is a lot to try to do. There's no guarantee of success, but it seems everybody seems to agree it's worthwhile to try and do this. Where instead of doing a bunch of discrete projects here, here in the Delta or here in the here in the Sacramento Valley, that or looking at ocean art, it's like, why don't we do it all together and see if we can come up with one? It makes a lot of sense. Appreciate your efforts. So wish us luck, and also the encouragement to participate. I think that we know that everybody here is busy people. You're not going to be able to jump in with both feet. Is there a way for the Conservancy to have an effective participation in this that helps channel a lot of the interests around the table here?
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you for the presentation too, and I think it's really relevant to the work we do. When this work is done, or as it even forms, it really helps us identify where we should be spending our money and how we evaluate our projects and whether or not there truly are the most effective ways that we can be spending our money for objectives related to salmon. I also want to note that I wore my salmon farmer tie today for this. Thank you very much.
And I want to see them pass now onto the other side of your neck.
There you go, you did it.
Success.
Okay, anybody else around the table?
Just one quick,
Sandy, go ahead.
just clarification. So at the end, do you anticipate having kind of objectives, acres, flows type objectives by watershed, or is it more qualitative?
No, we're hoping for a specific set of measures that are projected to achieve those objectives, right? And maybe, maybe they won't fully, but the idea is to be specific about it. Here are the prioritized sets of, what we don't want to do is just say, here's a couple of actions. We want to say, here's a set of actions that make sense together, that together will address, will give us the biggest bang for the buck and make sure that there's complete coverage of all the different life history stressors so that we're not, this is the problem when we all have favorite things to do, right? Like, for instance, one of the most attractive things to do is expand floodplains because we know that just helps juvenile salmon just explode, right? They grow faster, they get fat, it increases their survival. But if temperatures are killing the spawning eggs, or if they're not making it through the delta, then if you put all your eggs into the floodplain basket, maybe that wasn't such a smart idea to do. So what we want to make sure is that in addition to sort of the things everybody is recognizing are great, that we're also doing the other things in the other parts of the life history that are not getting the attention they need, or enough attention. And again, this is in order to see if we can meet certain metrics of success with suites of specific actions. Now, there won't maybe be specific projects, right? But there'll be, action categories.
Gary, real quickly, follow on. So how does the Delta Independent Science Board then fit into the spectrum of what you're doing and all the way what your product will be when you're done in 2024? So how does that factor in?
Well, I don't know how the ISB will fit in, other than to say that because we're producing this for the Delta Science Program,
yes,
at some point I expect that there'll be some outside review of what we do, but that probably will occur after we produce our report, just because of the timeline. That timeline that you saw, that were the 3 phases, phase 3 begins, later this year, with the idea of a final product to the council by mid-2024, which I think putting in an independent science review in there is just not going to be feasible.
Okay.
But I expect that it will happen.
Be available after for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Anybody on the phone? Any questions or comments?
No, but thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Anybody else? Okay. If not, then any public comment, Hope?
No public comment.
Okay. Well, Gary and Lindsay, thank you so much for being here today. Godspeed to your work. Obviously, you got a lot ahead, but appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for.
That's right, Gary. You're experienced at that. So, okay.
right,
Very good.
well.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Gary. Very good. No action on this item. Again, this is receive and file. So, yes. Very good. Thank you to our visitors. Okay, so moving down then, we'll move down to item 15, which is your report on the final outcomes of the Delta Aquatic Resource Inventory Mapping Project. And again, Dr. Rachel Wiggins. Rachel, good morning again.
Hello again, everyone. This agenda item presents the final outcomes of the Delta Aquatic Resource Inventory, or DARI, mapping project, which was supported by competitive funds awarded to the Delta Conservancy through the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Wetland Program Development Grant solicitation in 2017. You can find the staff report on page 78 of your board packet. The technical work for this project was led by the San Francisco Estuary Institute Aquatic Science Center and concluded in March of 2022. I'm very pleased to be joined by phone by my colleague Christine Grosso, who is the Managing Director of the Aquatic Science Center's Environmental Informatics Program and was the DARI project lead for ASC. Also on the phone is Joe Morgan from the US EPA, who is the Grant Manager for the DARI project. Next slide, please, Hope. The purpose of the DARI project was to catalog the surface waters, wetlands, and other aquatic resources of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta using a standardized approach developed by a working group of experts and agency staff. This data set can be used to establish a baseline for existing aquatic resources, prioritize management actions, determine project effectiveness, track changes in the amount and quality of aquatic resources, and coordinate wetland monitoring and assessment. The DARI project has also developed a set of standard operating procedures for updating the data set, which encourages local stewardship of DARI and helps keep the data set current. I'm going to turn it over now to Christina to give you a report on the final project outcomes and products of this work before briefly turning it over to Joe for a few remarks.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Can you just confirm that you can hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, thanks.
Okay, great, thank you. Good morning, board members. Today, could you go to the next slide, please? Good morning, board members. Today I'll provide more information on CARI and DARI, discuss highlights from the RIPSET pilot study and how to access the DARI products, and explain the relationship of DARI with EcoAtlas and Project Tracker. Next slide, please. CARI is the California Aquatic Resource Inventory, which is a statewide map of wetlands and streams. It is a statewide compilation of the best available regional and federal mapping efforts and includes the National Wetland Inventory as well as the National Hydrography data set. It uses a common classification system across the state so we can compare different regions consistently, but it also contains the level of detail needed to support local use planning. And updates to the CARI dataset are exchanged with the National Wetland Inventory on a regular basis to support national assessment. Next slide, please. DARI, or the Delta Aquatic Resource Inventory, is a regional intensification of CARI. Similar efforts have been conducted in the Bay Area, on the North Coast, and in Lake Tahoe. And while vegetation maps are used to help identify and map wetlands, such as CalVeg and VegCamp, DARI is not a vegetation map. It's a habitat map of surface waters, wetlands, and other aquatic resources in the Sacramento and San Joaquin Delta. Next slide, please. And we define aquatic resources as surface waters and related habitat types, including wetlands, rivers, streams, lakes, and wetland portions of riparian area. Next slide, please. The project was guided by a work group that contained stakeholders and mapping experts from many of the agencies that will use DARI. The work group served a critical role to the success of the project by identifying and providing relevant data sets to include in the mapping, establish a standard regional typology or habitat classification system, provide the QA/QC review of the map and mapping procedures, and they will also hopefully encourage the ongoing stewardship of DARI. Next slide, please. This slide acknowledges the large mapping team that consisted of both SFEI staff and academic interns, which were able to successfully perform the mapping remotely during the pandemic. Next slide, please. The DARI mapping process included identifying and compiling the existing data set, developing a regional habitat classification system with the work group for the Delta, creating this detailed map of wetlands and streams, leveraging stakeholder expertise for the review of the maps to ensure that it was capturing the landscape as they expected it to, preparing robust SOP or standard operating procedures documentation to accompany the data set. And the SOP identifies the procedures and outlines the decisions that were made for future reference. And then finally, integrating DARI into CARI and making it available on the public visualization tool called EcoAtlas. Next slide, please. And we are happy to report that the grayed out area of the Delta in the CARI data set, which is shown on the left for the past several years in EcoAtlas, has now been replaced with this more detailed wetland and stream information, which is shown on the right. And in addition to being able to view and summarize the DARI data within the EcoAtlas toolset, the DARI GIS dataset and the standard operating procedures are also available for downloading as a standalone dataset. Next slide, please. Under the DARI EPA grant, we unfortunately didn't have the funding to map the riparian areas in the Delta. However, due to the importance of the riparian areas, we were able to conduct a pilot study using an existing tool called the Riparian Zone Estimator Tool, or RIPSET. And we used this tool to estimate functional riparian within the Delta that used the DARI dataset, as well as vegetation height and slope at the edge of channels to estimate the riparian habitat extent, as well as to identify ecosystem services. Next slide, please. And all of the DARI products that I've mentioned are publicly available. The DARI and RIPSET GIS datasets and SOPs and memos are available for downloading from SFDI's Regional Data Center page. Next slide, please. One of the benefits of making DARI available in EcoAtlas is that EcoAtlas compiles inventories across the Bay Delta region and provides online summary tools for assessing net change of wetlands and related habitats. And the DARI dataset will continue to be enhanced along with other upcoming mapping efforts, such as the Baylands Change Base Map that is funded by an EPA Water Quality Improvement Fund grant, and an update to the coastal watersheds that is currently being funded by the Ocean Protection Council. Next slide, please. In closing, this project builds upon another Delta Conservancy project that uses Project Tracker to track habitat restoration projects in the Delta, which are shown on this map as colored dots. So we now have a DARI base map of where the wetlands are located, a way to track standardized information on restoration projects across programs and agencies in the Delta. And then we have these dynamic summary tools that will be able to compile this information in a user-friendly format within EcoAtlas. Next slide, please. So thank you so much for your time and support. This slide contains a few links to the DARI products that I mentioned. And now, Rachel, I believe you wanted to hand it over to Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. Joe, if you want to unmute yourself and make any remarks that you'd like.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel and Christina. I'm Joe Morgan from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Region 9 office in San Francisco. And like Rachel said, I'm the project officer for the Wetlands Program Development Grant, which supported the development of the Delta Aquatic Resources Inventory. I'm very pleased to be here today to join Rachel and Christina to announce the completion of the mapping of Delta Aquatic Resources. The information in DARI, which is now free and publicly accessible, and also integrated with other information on aquatic resources in EcoAtlas, is going to be critical to monitoring the extent and condition of Delta wetlands, and thus supporting infrastructure and restoration planning in the region. Really happy with the collaboration and partnership that we've had with the Conservancy and SFDI in developing this project, and look forward to continuing to work with you all to protect California's wetlands. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Joe and Christina. I think if there are any questions, we can take them now.
Okay, great. Well, thank you to all three of you, especially Rachel here in the room, and Christine and Joe for your efforts in leading the work and all the contributors. So let me go to the table first. Are there any questions or comments? I don't see any. Anybody on the phone? Okay, hearing none. Campbell, anything you wanted to weigh in?
Just want to say thank you to SFDI and the whole team for all the work through the years, EPA and all. It's exceedingly helpful. Gary, I don't know if you all have tapped into EcoAtlas for project information. I assume you have, but it sort of shows how things come together, and this is the type of information that supports the work that we do and helps us track it. So.
Just one question I had. So how does it integrate, because there's been mapping of farmland over time through Department of Conservation, the state, local contributions. How does that integrate then? Because again, that sometimes that's a conflict when you have areas that are farmed that, you know, there's either a restoration project proposed and so forth. So I'm curious about, does EcoAtlas reflect different layers of mapping, or is it solely just the wetlands and the things that were described here?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm going to toss that one to Christina. So Christina, the question was about mapping of other types in, like, as base layers in EcoAtlas. So are there any crop types or farmland maps that are incorporated into the base maps of EcoAtlas currently?
Yes, thank you so much for your question. This is, of course, a huge issue within the Delta, and the work group really provided a lot of guidance on this topic. So what we have done is we have a modifier within the data set for managed wetlands, and this includes being able to distinguish rice fields, duck clubs, and then restoration projects. And it's a way to flag any wetlands that require anthropogenic management in order to manage those areas.
So it sounds like there is some of that captured with crop types that might be grown on managed wetlands, but as far as overall, like integrating a veg camp or something like that into EcoAtlas, not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, it worked for another project probably, so. Okay, very good. Any members of the public?
No public comment.
Okay. All right, well again, certainly, you know, been a good deal of time and certainly work gone into this, and again, kudos to all the folks that contributed to it. So, all right, this is a receive and file. So again, thank you, Rachel, and thank you to Christina and Joe. All right, takes us down to part of our agenda where we get some additional updates. The first one being our EcoRestore update and on the Yolo bypass working agreement. We have Charlotte listed. Is Charlotte on the phone?
Charlotte, are you on the phone? I wondered if I had. Charlotte, are you there?
Jessica, she had emailed and she was asking how to unmute her.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yep, you're there. Good.
Hi, Charlotte. Good morning.
I muted myself and had to unmute. So good morning, board members. Thanks for having me here on the agenda today. I just have a quick update on EcoRestore, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I am heading out to a project site in the field today. And I'm going to be out in the field a lot, and that's because we have a couple projects that are either under construction or gearing up to start work this year, which is, I think, great news for the Delta ecosystem. So I'm going to highlight 3 of those efforts for you all today. The first project is Lookout Slough. So it's a multi-benefit tidal habitat and flood improvement project. It's over 3,000 acres of tidal wetlands that will be created in the Slough region in the lower Yolo bypass area. This is an exciting project both because of its large scale and the location of the effort, and the fact that we were able to get both habitat and flood benefits in one project. We started construction just a couple weeks ago, early May. We're focusing first on building the new setback levee, which will be inspected by the Army Corps of Engineers before it's functional. And construction is expected to last at this site the next 2 to 3 years, depending on some different factors, including weather. And we will be working, after construction is done, DWR owns the site, and we will be working with the Reclamation District, as well as CDFW and other partners to manage the site in the long term. And we will be having a groundbreaking event for the site in early June. I believe Supervisor Bashford is able to join us from Solano County, so we're really excited to be able to celebrate this project moving forward. The second project I wanted to highlight for you all is Bradmore Island. I think I've been mentioning this one to you. Construction is getting ready to start at Bradmore Island this summer, I think in August. And it's a tidal restoration project in the Sassoon Marsh, also within Solano County. It's about 500 acres of a wetland that we are restoring tidal action to. Broadmoor is right next door to a project we completed last year known as Arnold Slough. And so together these two sites create over 700 acres of wetlands that will provide habitat, food production for fish in the marsh area. And we are hoping to host a small get-together out on the site before we start construction. It's a very small site, kind of challenging, but we're also going to be putting out a video and hopefully doing something virtual to celebrate. And then the last effort is the Fremont Weir Big Notch project. It's the first major fish passage improvement project in the bypass, and we're excited that work will be beginning on this effort soon. I think we're anticipating early June. And we hope to have an event out at the site, or we are having an event out at the site in mid-June. I believe the dates went out earlier this week or are going out soon. DWR and the Bureau of Reclamation are partnering on this effort as the water project operators. Well, we've worked with many, many partners over the years to plan this effort, including landowners in the area. One of those key partners is, of course, Yolo County. We have worked hard together for years on this effort, trying to figure out how to make this project work both for the state and the county's interests, as well as local landowners and others. And recently we signed an MOU with the county related to this project, which I'll invite Supervisor Provenza to add to this brief description. The MOU between DWR and the county lays out some commitments related to this project, support of drainage projects in the bypass, process for resolving any issues that come up in the future as we're operating the new project, and DWR's support of a position at the county that will help with coordination and communication. So we're very appreciative to have this working agreement in place with the county, and that's my update, and I'll invite Yolo County to add anything to that message.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yep.
Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate that. When I came onto the Board of Supervisors just about 14 years ago, this was one of the first issues I was presented with. And of course, the Fremont Weir project would put more water into the Yolo Basin earlier. It was presented to me as a clash of interests. This is going to hurt agriculture. It's going to hurt our wildlife area, which of course is birds. So this birds versus fish, agriculture versus fish, and that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And so our Yolo County staff began to engage that long ago with both DWR, Metropolitan Water District, and many other stakeholders in the process, and to give the settlement, and I don't even like to refer to it as a settlement. It implies a lawsuit. There wasn't a lawsuit. It was a discussion over time and a memorandum of understanding between the state and Yolo County. But to give it context, we kind of have to step back to some of the agreements that were made earlier. One of the issues for Yolo County was, well, what's the impact on rice growing? And nobody really had very precise information, so Yolo County embarked on its own study, and eventually we received some funding from both Metropolitan Water District and the state to help us, because we don't have much money for that sort of thing, for a lot of studies and consultants, but we were able to study it and determine that putting the additional water into the bypass can be done in a way that does not essentially take out the rice industry by limiting the additional water, or attempting to limit it to March 15th as opposed to June 15th, with still receiving substantial fish benefits. So that was a change that was made early on in the project that was probably the most significant for Yolo County. And along the way, the state and again the water districts were very cooperative in helping us develop some projects in the wildlife area that helped in terms of any impacts of additional water. Some of the drainage projects, millions of dollars allocated to those projects, will help with any impact on the wildlife area, as will the earlier drainage state. So what this most recent settlement does is it funds a person in Yolo County to keep track of all this. And that's huge for a county like Yolo, because we have one natural resources person who deals with everything, every issue that comes up in this area. And then a couple supervisors who are assigned to committees like this one who try to keep up. Having a dedicated person is going to be a tremendous benefit because we'll be able to keep up on an ongoing basis. And for this to work, there has to be a lot of communication. And for us to have staff engaged on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis and be able to work together, we think that we'll be able to be protective of agriculture, make sure that our migrating birds are okay, and in fact that our wildlife area is even strengthened, and contribute significantly to the fish project. And we all have to be flexible. There'll probably be disagreements in the future, but I'm confident that going forward we're in a very good place. So thank you, Carrie, and thank DWR and everybody else at the state and the water contractors who worked with us over the years. I think, again, we're in a good place and looking forward to moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for your work. I know you, as you said, you've been working on this for well over a dozen years, so, and appreciate your willingness to engage, and certainly, your board of supervisors on behalf of obviously a very broad constituency within the Yolo bypass area. So, okay. Any other comments? Any of the reports that Charlotte offered? Anybody on the phone? Okay, very good. All right, well, thank you, Charlotte. Appreciate your updates. Okay, next then we'll have the Delta Stewardship Council update. I know we have Amanda Bull, so Amanda.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here in person with you all. Just a couple of updates. First, the council is having its monthly meeting tomorrow. The council is required to meet monthly, and the focus of tomorrow's meeting is actually a tour of the Delta. We have a little bit of business that we'll be conducting first thing at our office at the Natural Resources Building, including the potential election of a new chair for the council, and that will be announced when that happens. And then we'll be taking off and heading down to Brannan Island, where the council is going to hear updates on Delta Adapts and from the Delta Watermaster, who is going to be one of our tour guides on our boat tour. So around 10 o'clock we'll leave on the boats. So again, Michael George, Watermaster, will be on one boat. Then we're also going to have John Burrell from USGS serving as the other tour guide. We'll come back to Brannan Island to the Pirates Lair Marina for a lunch discussion, and this will be one of the places where it'll be easy for the public to come and join and be part of that conversation. At 1, the boat tour will continue from Brannan Island again, and then we'll come back around 2, and we're going to head to Stockton, where we're going to meet with a couple of community groups who've been really active in our environmental justice issue paper effort and are serving on our environmental justice expert group. So we'll have Matt Holmes from Little Manila Rising and Barbara Barragan-Priya from Restore the Delta, who'll be talking about environmental justice issues, and in particular HABs. And I hear that we are just in time for a very recent outbreak of HABs, or I'm not sure if that's quite the right word for it, but anyway, so there will be some on display, unfortunately, for the council to see. So, and then the meeting is expected to adjourn around 4 o'clock in Stockton, and then we'll head back to Sacramento and go on our way. I know Campbell is planning to join us on the tour as well, as is Eric. And then I think we have a few public spots that have also been taken by members of the public. But our council members are very excited to get out there in the Delta. A number of them have actually never really spent a lot of time in the Delta, so it'll be a good opportunity for them to get out, both on the land and in the water. Well, on boats in the water, not hopefully in the water. Anyway, a couple of other just science updates that I wanted to let you all know about. The science program has released its 2022-2026 Science Action Agenda, which identifies science priorities for focused action and is the culmination of nearly 2 years of really intense work by the entire Delta science and management community. And the Science Action Agenda is available on the council's website, and if you're interested, I'm sure our science program staff would be happy to come and present the outcomes from that. And then also, the Stewardship Council has been working in partnership with the San Francisco Estuary Institute for some time to develop version 2 of the Landscape Scenario Planning Tool, which is a GIS-based analysis toolkit And the tool really is helpful in that it helps quantify how projects may affect different priorities, such as supporting healthy native fish populations, reversing land subsidence, sequestering carbon, and supporting local economies. And that's also available online, and there's more information online on how to actually use that and how it can benefit various projects. So, and with that, I'll answer any questions about what I've reported on or anything else.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. Any questions about the tour tomorrow? The public is invited, certainly some limited capacity relative to some of the transportation, but they're certainly invited to join us at the different locations. So.
Sounds like a rough work day to me.
Where does it begin, or how does it?
It begins at the Natural Resources building there at 7th and P.
Yeah, and then I think from there around 8:30, hopefully if we stay on time, we will head down to Brandon Island, and we're meeting at Pirates Lair Marina. And so from there we'll get on the boats and go. And so it'll be hard on the boats because of limited availability on the boats for the public to participate, and we'll actually be stopping the meeting when we're on the boats, and the members will be on separate boats, so we don't have a quorum at any point in time. But certainly the land-based portions, there'll be opportunities for the public to engage and to listen to conversations. So.
Great. We anticipate only having 5 council members with us, though there are 2 that have, I guess, prearranged absences, so there'll be 5 of us. Yeah. And obviously Stewardship Council staff, Eric and Campbell and others, Mr. George, as you mentioned, the water master. So is there still some availability if people wanted to do the full tour? Are people expected to drive behind the vans that are transporting?
They would have to, yeah, because again, while we're in the vans also, we will not have a quorum in either van, so the meeting will be adjourned or paused for that period of time. So it's just when all 5 are together that we'll be having.
The Pirates Lair is the east side of Brandon.
Yeah, I would say Pirates Lair or in Stockton. And in Stockton, we're going to be at the Bella Vista Rooftop and Events Center at 3 o'clock. So those are probably the 2 best.
Is that Weber Point?
It's actually, I think, really close to Weber Point. I think we decided to move it so we have a place that's a bit more comfortable. Although I think it's only supposed to be like low 80s tomorrow, not like today, thankfully. But just in case it's too hot. Yeah.
Yeah, Karen.
This is not directed at you, and I really have tried not to be snarky, but I heard you say that many of the Delta Stewardship Council members have never been out in the Delta.
A couple of them.
So first of all, thank you for hosting this or putting it together, but I actually find that pretty obscene. And that's just stated for the record. I think that's wrong. I'm looking at who sits on this, and you know, that when I go to appoint people to commissions and advisory bodies in my county and my district, after I say, why are you interested in this position, have you attended a meeting? And so that the governor would appoint people who've never been in the Delta is obscene. Thank you.
So noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Anyone else? Okay, if not, thanks, Amanda. Thanks to staff. Any public comment? Oh, maybe I asked it already.
No.
Okay. Anybody on the phone? Okay. All right, moving down to our updates. Thank you again, and welcome folks tomorrow to join the tour. Delta Protection Commission, Eric.
Great, thank you. Good to see everyone around the table. Just a couple of things I wanted to report on. One is we're undergoing an effort with a Clean California grant, which is Caltrans' program to beautify the state. And we're working with Caltrans District 10 out of Stockton on a grant to provide wayfinding and interpretive signage in the Delta, or I should say in the District 3 and District 10 part of the Delta, which means Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Yolo counties. We weren't able to loop in Caltrans District 4 into this. And I mentioned this here at the Conservancy because this was a project that came out of the Delta Marketing Task Force, the joint effort between the Conservancy and the Commission. And in addition to those Clean California wayfinding and interpretive signs, we'll be installing our Welcome to the Delta National Heritage Area signs, which is also an effort that was first birthed in the Delta Marketing Task Force. So mainly wanted to provide an update on signs to you all today. And also I wanted to mention that our commission met last Thursday. We had a very short business meeting, but then the commission conducted executive director interviews. I'm going to be leaving my position. And the commission did select a candidate, but are still working through details. And I would expect that we'll be able to announce that here very shortly. So I know you all next meet on July 27th. You might see me here then. We'll see. I'm committed to sticking around until whoever succeeds me is in place. So that's all I have to report.
Well, thanks, Eric, and hopefully we'll get a chance in the Conservancy here to see you again, but again, appreciate your efforts, and again, I know that's been a real collaborative work with you and Campbell with the Conservancy, and certainly working with Stewardship Council representatives as well, and carrying out the role of the commission. So, and as you said, we hope to have an announcement. We're working through some of the details on the selection, but hopefully have that. And I appreciate your willingness to overlap. You're an important mentor in the process of handing it over to the next person. So. Any questions of Eric or any of the commission activities? Eric, just real quick on the National Heritage Area Management Plan, just a quick update. I mean, those of us on the commission are familiar, but it might be just to tell us kind of what the timing is on that.
Yeah, thank you. I should have mentioned that. So I think everyone's aware around the table that we have a Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta National Heritage Area that was created in 2019 federal legislation. And we are working on the required management plan for that National Heritage Area. We have a advisory committee that I don't think anyone in the room is part of it. I always have to think, who's part of our committee? Because usually someone in the room is.
Deborah, we participate on that.
Yeah, Deborah is an ex officio member, but we have 15 voting members on that and have been meeting consistently over the last year and a half. I would expect that the management plan will probably come together by the end of this calendar year, and that's certainly our intention, and to bring it to the commission for their adoption. But the pieces are finally starting to fall into a good place, and that might be something I can provide a little more of an update to this board at when you next meet.
Okay. And once it's approved by the commission, then it's submitted to the Department of Interior for their review, I guess.
Yeah, they review it. They rarely do anything with it, but they'll likely approve it. And I mean, in a way, this is anticlimactic because we've always acted like we were a National Heritage Area. We just never had the formal designation. And so in my mind, nothing really has changed that much, but this will make it official, and it does make us eligible for a slightly higher level of federal support for the effort. Federal support coming into a state program is not the greatest thing in the world. It does come with some significant challenges, just navigating the bureaucracy and the cut that the state takes of any amount. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. If we can get that money out into projects in the Delta, that'll be fantastic. That's always been my goal.
Sure.
It's been a little bit challenging for us to do that.
But we are the only National Heritage Area on the West Coast, is that correct?
In California.
In California.
We have NHAs in Washington State.
Okay, so in California, the only one in California, so it certainly heightens the visibility for the Delta and all the various facets that are very important to many of the things that this Conservancy obviously is a part of, but certainly the people in California. Okay, very good. Any questions of Eric? Very good, thanks, Eric. Okay, no public comment?
No public comment.
All right. If there's nobody on the phone, then we're going to move to our last report, which is our Delta Conveyance update. Carrie, I know you've been on the phone, so good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Chair Natoli and members of the board for having me this morning. So I have a couple of quick updates. The first is, I think, as I've been saying for a few months now, we are hard at work on the public draft of the environmental impact report and planning to release it this summer. We don't have an exact date. We're aiming for sort of midsummer, but we will see how this last stretch works. The Corps of Engineers is also working on release of their draft environmental impact statement. It will probably trail the EIR by a little bit, and they'll have a shorter review period because they're a federal agency. They have a separate process, but we're trying to have the reviews overlap because there will be references in the environmental impact statement to the environmental impact report. So that will make, hopefully that will make that review process a little easier. I also wanted to mention that we have posted on our website our draft of the framework for the Community Benefits Program. As we've been talking to communities about the program, we have continued to develop that framework, and it will be included in our public draft yet. So wanted to post it earlier in case it helps with some of the discussions and because people are interested. So it is posted on our website, and comments on that will be part of the commenting process on the draft EIR this summer because, as I mentioned, it is an appendix in that document. And the last thing I wanted to mention was that we have started a spring session of our geotechnical field investigations. So fieldwork started on May 9th and is expected to continue until about the end of June. And so for this spring session, total, we've been planning to do about 15 boreholes and 14 cone penetration tests. We've done 13 of those cone penetration tests and about 5 boreholes, so we still have roughly 10 boreholes and cone penetration tests left to be done by late June. And if people are interested in locations, we keep a map on our website that is a 2-week look ahead, so you can see where we are. We have about 3 drill rigs working at a time. So I think that's my update. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, Carrie. Any questions of Carrie around the table? Comments? Anybody on the phone? Okay, hearing none. Opening comments?
No.
Public comments? Okay. Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate the update. And with that, then, that takes us to our final agenda item, which is the potential agenda items for the July meeting. And I think we have a list included in the agenda. So, Campbell, you want to do a quick run through?
Just very quickly, we always do board elections for chair and vice chair in July, so we will do that. There likely will be Prop 68 community economic development grants to consider. As we mentioned before, we will be bringing the Proposition 1 staff recommendations for the 5th grant cycle to the board in July. I've been promising an overview of Delta Carbon for quite a while. I will make sure that happens in July and put that up on enough. And then we will actually have our the implementation plan update in July, which we always do halfway through the year, but it might be brief since we just put out the implementation plan today. So that and anything that you all would like to consider or mention to include, we're happy to entertain that.
The agenda item that was pulled?
Yes, yes, it's very likely that that will be on as well.
Item 13 will likely reappear.
And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Any suggested items for the agenda for July? Folks would like to have included?
I guess I'll just ask if maybe pushing the implementation plan update to the October meeting and splitting the difference between that and that plan.
Okay.
There's a preference for that.
Any preference?
Those are coming next
You okay?
week.
They got pushed? I don't hear objections, so I guess we'll leave it to the staff to determine if depending on how crowded the agenda is and the work that leads up to it.
We'll have more to update on if we come in October versus July.
Okay, very good, Darren. And you'll be back in, we'll see you in July?
No,
July. Yes, in July. Yes, October now.
Okay. Well, okay.
Yes.
All right. Any folks on the phone? Any suggestions for any agenda items or any comments? All right. If not, any comments from public? Public's been very quiet here this morning, so. And then the last item on agenda is public comment. We'd opened that previously, but I don't think we have anybody in the room that hasn't already spoken. You were with the lady in the back. Were you? Is anything?
No.
I think you're the only one who didn't speak today. So
I introduced myself. I'm with Yolo Basin Foundation.
Yeah, I know. Very good. We're glad you're with us, though. And I knew you did introduce yourself. Okay. All right. With that, then, unless there's anything else coming before this body, we'll adjourn at 11:24. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the day. Stay cool, and we'll see you back July 27th.